are live on Instagram. We are live on Facebook. And welcome to the podcast, listeners. My name is Dustin Jones. You are listening to the PT on Ice Daily Show brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. Today is Wednesday. That means it's Jerry on Ice, where we talk about all things older adults. Today is also Hump Day. So many of y'all received the Hump Day Hustle email. Awesome one from Jeff Moore this morning. Some very interesting research on total knee replacements that's going to be a little tough to read, I think, for many of us, but a really good read. Awesome email. If you're not on that email, go to ptonice.com and click on the HDH tab and you will see that there. All right, today's topic at hand, we're going to be talking about better balance with perturbation training. Better balance with perturbation training. This past weekend, I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma with Julie Brower. We taught a modern management of the older adult live with the PT of Tulsa crew. Ian and his crew, awesome weekend. Really grateful for them hosting us. I gotta show you this shirt. If you're listening on the podcast, you gotta watch the video to see this. If this doesn't say PT version 2.0, I don't know what is. That design on the back with the guy holding the kettlebell is absolutely beautiful. Awesome design. A patient actually designed that for them. So Ian, love the shirt, man. Appreciate it. But that weekend, or this past weekend, was awesome. The group was locked in, super engaged. And one of my favorite labs, and we had a good discussion on this, is the balance lab. The balance lab, I feel, is where we can really we can gain a lot of ground in terms of how we're serving the people that we are working with to really improve their balance in a tangible way. And perturbation training for many folks is going to be a large part of that. Now, when we talk about balance training, it's very, very important that when we speak to this, to balance, is that we are really shaping our interventions based on the deficit that is present. And so a thorough assessment is warranted. And a great tool that we often leverage and speak to is the mini best test, especially for those kind of in that outpatient orthopedic setting. They're mainly working with community dwelling older adults. That mini best test is going to be able to tease out some of the components of balance and where deficits may lie. And what you're going to see is that some areas your patient may be doing pretty well. Other areas they may be really struggling. And so for many folks, that reactive postural control is going to be a challenge. Their ability to respond to some type of external stimulus or instability to provide that particular strategy, whether it's a ankle, hip, or even stepping strategy, to maintain their balance. That is going to be a struggle. So oftentimes we are going to leverage perturbation training to address that. But that's not always the case. But we really want you to look through that. So let's say reactive postural control is an issue. We're going to do some type of perturbation training. Now, when we speak to perturbation training, really kind of categorize it into two types. You have your internal perturbations and then your external perturbations. If you listen to this podcast, the PT on Ice Daily Show, many of you are already performing internal perturbation training with your patients. If you are having them perform any movements that may cause instability, especially with resistance, you're doing internal perturbation training in some way, shape, or form. Deadlifts, squats, loaded carries, many of the exercises that you are doing. Internal perturbations, basically when you have a patient carry out a task that is going to cause instability. That's great. Keep doing it. Be progressive with it. Load it up. We talk about this all the time. There's also externally based perturbations. That's where you, the therapist, apply perturbations that can include lean and release techniques. It can include pushing and pulling. It can include some more high-tech interventions like the perturbation-based treadmill training, where the treadmill is actually intentionally moving, changing speeds quickly to apply that perturbation. Those are external based perturbations, and this is where this may be lacking in many plans of care and where we can be rather creative in this realm. So internal and then external perturbations. Are you using one or the other or both? And a lot of times, if reactive postural control is an issue, we want to use both. Now, when you look at the literature of perturbation training, it's rather interesting, especially the recent trends of some higher tech equipment and things that could really make perturbation training very, very effective and very objective. One that comes to mind is the active step treadmill. I'll post a link to an interesting video on the Facebook video for this episode of when I was on an active step treadmill in St. Louis with Beth Templin at HouseFit, her clinic there in St. Louis. It was absolutely eye-opening for me to be on this treadmill. But this treadmill basically has force plates in it, and that treadmill can quickly accelerate, which would simulate a trip, a quick acceleration, or it can kind of shift direction or quick deceleration, which would kind of indicate a slip. And so the beautiful part about that active step treadmill is all that is measurable, and those force plates can measure the time between the trip or the slip and your reaction and when you take that step. You're locked into a harness, so it's very, very safe, but it's absolutely terrifying from my standpoint. But you can be very objective and show objective change rather quickly. That's kind of the high-tech realm. Those things are not cheap, but a lot of clinics are leveraging this. Outpatient clinics are leveraging this to be able to show objective data and improving people's reaction timing, and then ultimately reducing falls. Then there's the low-tech side of things, where it's kind of the manual therapist applied pull, push, lean and release, really leveraging maybe a body weight supported harness that they're just putting over a regular treadmill. Or you may see some people that have kind of the ceiling harness systems, or you're just a home health clinician with a gait belt, just trying tugging and pulling on someone in different stances or even different movements. There's a wide application to this, but we want to talk about 3 things to really focus on for you that are going to really get the most bang for your buck. The first one is setup. The setup of this is going to be important. And when I say setup, you could speak to the high-tech versus the low-tech options. What I'm really speaking to when I think of setup is the setup that your patient is comfortable with. Perturbation training is terrifying for you if you do it appropriately. It is for me whenever I've been exposed to the stimulus. But then definitely for your patients that may have some fear of falling on board already, that perturbation training, especially at an appropriate magnitude, is going to be terrifying. So we want to put them in a position or a location or a setup that they're going to feel relatively safe. Part of that is being able to handle that person. I think this is where stronger clinicians are better clinicians. There's a PT on Ice I did a while back on that topic, to where the stronger you are, the more weight that you can handle, the more comfortable your patient's going to be. Yes, there's going to be that size differential that it's going to be very difficult to overcome. But if you can handle some weight with resistance training, your patient's going to trust you a little bit more. So part of that. Also, what optional handholds do you have? So often gait belts are commonly used, but what about a transfer belt? Some clinics have this, some don't. Some home health clinicians will have it, some don't in different settings. A transfer belt, if you search that on Amazon, there's all kinds of options there. Think of it kind of like a gait belt that goes around the waist. It's a little thicker or wider, I should say. But it has various handholds. So it'll have loops that may be vertical. It may have a couple loops that are going to be horizontal, but there's all kinds of options to grab a hold of that patient whenever they lose their balance. So transfer belts, search that, get one. They're not expensive, and that can allow you to be much more comfortable in handling someone. Those transfer belts also offer different areas that you can attach, maybe elastic bands or some type of band to where you can apply even more perturbation. So there's transfer belts. Also, where you do this. So if you're in the home, maybe not doing this right in the middle of a huge open living room, but you may do it maybe closer to the couch or somewhere where they can have a handhold on something, to where that's going to be a little more comfortable for these individuals. So you want to think about that, to where they're a little bit more comfortable in their surroundings, more comfortable in you and your ability to handle them when they do lose balance, and then also having the equipment like a transfer belt that is going to be a little more comforting to them rather than just a simple flimsy gait belt. So setup is one. The second thing is the magnitude of those perturbations. Good morning, Jennifer. How you doing? The magnitude of those perturbations, that's pretty consistent in the literature, is that if you're not applying enough of a perturbation, then you may not necessarily be promoting enough a stimulus for adaptation. Is that you want to be on the edge of comfort and the edge of fear. Right in there is kind of that thin line, and that's where we want to spend a lot of our time with this perturbation training. A lot of guidance is going to be around nearly requiring upper extremity assistance. So these people are going to really be on that border, which can be very uncomfortable. And so we want to be able to accommodate for that. So magnitude, for many of y'all, you're going to have to be applying these perturbations a whole lot stronger, if you will, if you're doing that manual pressure or the pushing and pulling, if you will. So the magnitude is going to be important, and it's going to be uncomfortable for some of your patients. But with that greater magnitude, for many of y'all, you also may likely have to lower your frequency in terms of how often you apply those perturbations. We see this commonly whenever we're practicing perturbation training in our courses, is that people are kind of applying those manual pushes and pulls with a greater magnitude, which is what we really want, but they often apply them quicker to where they're not allowing enough time for that patient or the clinician to kind of lose their balance, adjust course, and then recover. That they're just kind of rocking them all over the place and not allowing enough space for them to really practice that reaction step or strategy. And so you really want to be very thoughtful of the frequency of those perturbations. And so for some individuals, you may apply that greater magnitude perturbation that you need to guard and just let them recover, maybe a second, maybe a couple seconds, and then apply it again rather than boom, 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 just going all over the place. So magnitude is going to be very, very important. Think about how you can do that. Setup as well. The third one is the scalability of perturbation training. Typically, when a lot of people do perturbation training, it's often in kind of a static position. They're just in a static stance, whether it's a normal base of support. They may go to semi-tandem if they're crazy. They may go to single leg stance if they're really, really crazy. But what we want to think about is that we want to scale in terms of the position, but then also the movement. A lot of falls happen in movement. It's a dynamic situation. Most people do not fall when they're just standing or sitting. They are moving in some way, shape, or form. So we want to apply these perturbations in a dynamic environment during gait training, during ambulation, maybe during a transfer, maybe during sit to stands. That is when we really want to provide a lot of these perturbations, especially if we're talking, manually clinician led. And so think dynamic. How can we apply these perturbations safely in a dynamic manner? And then the last thing in terms of scaling beyond the dynamic piece is how can you ramp up or ramp down the cognitive demand of that perturbation, then also thinking about dual tasking, whether cognitive dual tasking or even motor dual tasking. Because oftentimes when we think about when falls occur in situations that are rather challenging for older adults, they're not very simple situations. They're moving, they're trying to perform a task, and they're typically dual tasking, and they're typically in somewhat of a complex environment. How can we emulate that in our session? So it may be having a conversation with your patient as you're performing perturbation training. It may be asking them questions, having them count down by 7 from 93, for example, or having them do a dual motor task of taking a bottle cap off of a bottle, or buttoning and unbuttoning a shirt, or folding a towel while they're performing gait training and you're doing some of those perturbations. It may look like that. And we can scale things up. We can also scale things down as well. That's going to be appropriate for that person. But overall, we want the magnitude to be appropriate, and we want it to be progressive over time. So setup, magnitude, and then scaling. These are things we want to think about with perturbation training. And you can be so creative with this stuff. I mean, it's amazing to see what people are doing. Mike Studer is one that comes to mind. He does some amazing things with people in his clinic on a treadmill, where people are kind of in a body weight supported harness that many clinics may have, especially if you're working with individuals that have suffered a stroke or have difficulty with ambulation. He'll put that bad boy right over the treadmill. They'll get on that treadmill and he'll manually apply perturbations, may put things down on the treadmill like obstacles that person has to step over, all kinds of things that we can do, all the way to the high-tech stuff with the active step. all the way to the home health clinician that doesn't have someone to rely on. You may only have a gait belt or transfer belt, and you can do perturbation training as well. Internal and external, talking about the setup, talking about the magnitude, and thinking about scaling. So those are some things I want to speak to about perturbation training. Make sure that you identify a deficit in that reactive postural control and then leverage perturbation training in your sessions. I didn't talk much about dosage in terms of volume and frequency because that's still kind of an iffy area in research. You're going to see a lot of variability in terms of an optimal prescription. So really can't speak to that too confidently at the moment, but that's going to change as the evidence changes. So I'd love to get your all's thoughts on this. How do you apply perturbation training in your particular settings? I'd love to hear from the home health clinicians that are kind of MacGyvering it without support. If you're in an outpatient clinic that may not have a lot of supportive equipment, or if you're in inpatient rehab with all the cool stuff, all the goods, all the tech, I'd love to hear your all's thoughts and contribute to this conversation, whether it's on Instagram or whether it's on Facebook. I'll be dropping the video of the active step on Facebook, and then also a couple of research articles that are a great read in terms of perturbation training. All right. Good chatting with y'all. In terms of the courses, Modern Management of the Older Adult, we've got a packed 2021. We've got our mask on. We're sanitizing our hands. We're social distancing and social fitnessing as well. But we've got a packed calendar. We're going to be in Arkansas in a couple weeks. We'll be in Kansas City a week after that. And then we're full steam ahead through the spring, summer, and fall. So we'd love to see you out on the road. Our next cohorts of our online courses, our Essential Foundations, is going to be starting up on March 3rd. So we're pretty excited about that. So hit me up. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on perturbation training. Otherwise, y'all have a lovely Wednesday, and I will talk to y'all soon. See ya.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.